Below is scene 1 expanded to approximately 1,000 words, without headings, as you asked. The winter evening pressed itself against the towering glass building like a heavy, cold blanket. Most floors of Hale Dynamics had already gone dark, each window fading one by one as employees rushed home to warmth, families, dinner tables, and the comfort of predictable routines. But high above the city, on the 36th floor, one light still burned stubbornly, almost angrily, Marcus Hale's office. Marcus sat hunched over his desk, though, sat, wasn't the right word, he almost collapsed into it. His broad shoulders, usually squared with easy confidence, slumped forward as though carrying an invisible weight. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, and his eyes, dry, strained, rimmed with exhaustion, stared into the same set of divorce papers he had been staring at for the last 2 hours. He could sign multi-million-dollar acquisitions without blinking, could negotiate with the sharpest board members without breaking a sweat, but these papers, these broke him. The silence of the office made everything louder. The faint hum of the heater, the distant elevator chime from down the hall, the ticking of the sleek, minimalist clock on the wall. Each tick felt like a reminder that time was moving forward whether he wanted it or not. He picked up his phone. Another message lit the screen, a final, curt line from his ex-wife regarding the last detail of their separation. Their communication had long turned into clean, polite business transactions. Nothing left of the warmth they once shared. Nothing left of the laughter. Nothing left of her voice calling his name in tenderness. Just this cold, short message. He tried to swallow the tightness in his throat, but it stuck, stubborn as a stone. He dropped the phone, letting it clatter onto the desk. A tiny, humiliating crack appeared on the glass. He exhaled, or perhaps it was more of a collapse of breath. Marcus leaned back in his chair and pressed the palms of his hands to his eyes. He hadn't cried earlier. Not during the signing, not afterward, not during the empty drive back to the office. He thought he wouldn't cry at all. That he couldn't. CEOs weren't supposed to break. They weren't supposed to show cracks in public or private. But now, alone in this hollow office, the weight on his chest became impossible to ignore. A single tear pushed its way out, sliding down the side of his nose and onto the papers. He wiped it away quickly, almost angrily. He didn't want evidence. He didn't want proof. He didn't want to admit the truth that he hadn't been willing to face. He had lost his partner, his home, his dreams of a family, and somewhere along the way, he had lost himself too. He stood abruptly, as though movement might save him from drowning. He grabbed his coat, expensive, tailored, but suddenly too heavy, and walked out of his office. He didn't turn off the lights. Didn't care. In the deserted hallway, his footsteps echoed sharply. Too loud, too lonely. He pressed the elevator button with a kind of impatience that wasn't directed at the elevator but at himself. When the doors slid open, he stepped inside and leaned back against the wall. The metal interior reflected his tired face back at him, grayish skin under the fluorescent lights, eyes too old for his age, expression empty. He barely recognized the man looking back. The elevator began its descent. At floor 26 it stopped, though no one boarded. He sighed deeply. Even the elevator couldn't move efficiently tonight. But then again, nothing in his life had felt efficient lately. Everything had felt stuck, heavy, drained of color. It continued downward. When it reached the 12th floor, it jolted lightly, just enough to make him straighten and glance. At the number panel, the doors slid open. He expected a coworker or janitor. Instead, he found himself looking into the curious face of a little boy, no older than 6. The boy stood there wearing a bright red puffy jacket zipped up to his chin, a knitted hat with a pom-pom, and mittens that didn't match. In one mittened hand he held a paper snowman, slightly crumpled but decorated with colorful stickers. The boy blinked up at him. Hi. Marcus stared for a moment, confused, caught off guard. Hello. The boy stepped inside confidently, as though elevators were playgrounds and CEOs were just tall strangers. He pressed his back against the opposite wall, looked at Marcus again, and asked, with complete innocence. Are you sad? Marcus stiffened. What? You look sad, the boy said simply. My teacher says I'm good at noticing feelings. Marcus almost laughed. Almost, but instead he let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. No, he said softly. I'm just tired. The boy pursed his lips thoughtfully. My mom says tired sad is the saddest kind. Marcus had no idea what to say to that. Before he could respond, a woman hurried down the hallway. She was breathless, cheeks flushed from rushing. Eli, I told you to wait by the door, sweetheart. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder, then looked up at Marcus with an apologetic smile. I'm so sorry. He wanders. Marcus shook his head. It's all right. But the woman froze slightly, her expression softening. It wasn't because she recognized him, she clearly didn't. It was because she looked at him the way people look at someone who's hurting. The way people look when they sense something fragile. You okay? She asked quietly. No one had asked him that all day. Not sincerely. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And then Eli spoke again, in that clear, bright, innocent voice that carried no hesitation, no judgment, no understanding of adult boundaries or the fragile pride adults hide behind. My mom hugs me when I'm sad, he announced confidently. She can hug you too. The woman gasped softly and touched Eli's arm. Eli, honey, we don't. But Marcus wasn't offended. He wasn't amused. He wasn't embarrassed. He was stunned. The honesty, the purity of it, the way a child could offer comfort to a stranger without thinking twice. Something in his chest loosened, something that had been locked tight for months. He looked at Eli's mother, and she looked back, kind eyes, warm gaze, a softness he hadn't felt from anyone in a long time. She didn't step forward, didn't force anything, but her small, understanding smile said enough. If he needed a hug, she wouldn't judge. In that quiet elevator, bathed in soft mechanical hum and the glow of yellow lighting, Marcus felt the first crack of light break through the wall he'd built around himself. And for the first time since morning, he breathed. Below is scene 2 expanded to approximately 1,000 words, without headings, just as you asked. Dash dash dash. They stepped out of the elevator together into the lobby, but for a long moment none of them moved. The soft hum of the building's heating system filled the quiet space, mixing with the faint scent of pine from the enormous Christmas tree set up near the entrance. The tree's lights twinkled gently, reflecting off the polished marble floor like scattered stars. It made the lobby feel warmer than it actually was, as though the decorations themselves were trying to comfort anyone who entered. Marcus stood there with his coat draped over his arm, feeling oddly suspended between two worlds, the cold, silent loneliness of the upper floors and the unexpected warmth in front of him. Eli tugged at his mother's mitten, excited, impatient in the way only children could be. Clara smiled down at her son, then glanced back up at Marcus with a kind of unspoken invitation. We were just heading outside to see the Christmas tree in the plaza, she said softly. If you'd like to join us, you're welcome. Her voice wasn't pushy or overly concerned. Just genuine, and it touched something inside him that had been starved of sincerity for far too long. He hesitated, but not because he didn't want to go, because he wasn't sure he remembered how to accept kindness. I think I'd like that, he said at last. Clara's smile deepened in quiet approval. Eli didn't wait for further permission, he took Marcus's hand with the natural ease of a child who trusted without calculating risk. Marcus looked down, startled at the small warmth wrapped around his fingers. He didn't let go. They walked toward the large glass doors. As they opened, a gust of winter air swept in, cold, crisp, and sharp enough to wake the senses. Snowflakes fell slowly, drifting like tiny feathers from a gray velvet sky. Outside, the plaza glowed with holiday lights, and a few families lingered near the giant tree despite the cold. Eli ran a few steps ahead, spinning around with his paper snowman waving in the air. Clara and Marcus followed more slowly, their footsteps soft in the fresh layer of snow. Clara walked close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed, but she respected the silent bubble around him. You looked like you had a hard day, she said gently. Marcus let out a slow breath that turned to mist in the cold air. A hard year, he admitted finally. Clara didn't feign surprise. She didn't gasp or pry. She just nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue if he wanted. He found himself grateful for that. I signed divorce papers this morning. The words were small and heavy as they left his mouth. I thought I'd be ready for it. I thought I'd moved past everything, that it wouldn't hit me the way it did. But it did, Clara said quietly. He swallowed, staring at the snow under his shoes. Yeah, it did. A pause. It felt like losing, something I should have tried harder to save. Or maybe losing something I'd already lost a long time ago. Clara looked up at the falling snow. Sometimes things end long before the paperwork catches up. That doesn't make it hurt any less. He blinked, surprised by how precisely her words struck. She spoke not like someone giving advice but like someone who had lived loss and still carried the lessons gently. I didn't expect it to feel so final, he whispered. I know, she said. They reached the base of the giant Christmas tree. The lights cast a warm golden glow across all their faces. Marcus lifted his gaze, watching the soft flicker of thousands of bulbs. For the first time all day, he felt something loosen in his chest. Eli ran back and grabbed Marcus's hand again, tugging him closer. "Come see, it's prettier when you stand right under it." Marcus allowed himself to be pulled. The boy positioned him carefully beneath the widest arc of branches, then looked up with bright eyes. "See," Marcus looked. And yes, up close, the lights looked like little galaxies suspended in evergreen. Snowflakes caught in the branches were illuminated like tiny diamonds. The sight struck him with unexpected tenderness. "It is pretty," he murmured. Eli nodded matter-of-factly. Then, without warning, he wrapped his small arms around Marcus's waist in a tight, earnest hug. Marcus froze. The child's warm cheek pressed against his coat. His arms, tiny but full of sincerity, hugged with no hesitation, no caution. Children hugged like love was easy, like offering comfort was the simplest thing in the world. Clara immediately stepped forward. "Eli, sweetheart, don't. It's okay," Marcus said softly, placing a trembling hand on the boy's back. He wasn't sure when he last received a hug from anyone at all. A real hug, not a polite shoulder tap or a stiff family gesture during holidays, but a hug with emotion in it. He let himself breathe into it. After a moment, Eli stepped back and grinned up at him. "Mom's hugs help even more," he declared with the full confidence of a child who believed his mother could fix the entire world with open arms. Clara's cheeks warmed with a flush of color. "Eli," she murmured, embarrassed but unable to hide a small smile. Marcus looked at her. Her eyes were soft, not pitying, not prying, just open, like a gentle door he hadn't expected to find tonight. A door everyone needed sometimes but few dared to walk through. Clara hesitated for a heartbeat. Then she opened her arms, not dramatically, not reluctantly, but simply, as though offering warmth to someone who desperately needed it. Marcus didn't overthink it. His body moved before his mind could stop him. He stepped into her embrace. It felt like stepping into a sanctuary. Her coat was warm from her own body heat, and her arms closed around him with gentle strength, firm enough to reassure him he wasn't going to fall, soft enough to remind him that comfort didn't require explanations. He pressed his forehead lightly to her shoulder. She didn't stiffen, she didn't speak, she just held him, steady and patient, while the world around them softened into quiet snow and golden lights. He didn't know how long they stayed like that. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30. But in that time, the cold inside him, the cold he had been carrying for months, finally began to thaw. When they eventually stepped apart, Marcus felt a little embarrassed, a little exposed, and yet, lighter. More human, as though something in him had been gently put back into place. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with sincerity. "You're welcome," Clara replied softly. "Sometimes all a person needs is a little warmth. Mom's hugs are magic," Eli chimed in proudly, lifting his paper snowman up as if it were proof. Marcus laughed, a real laugh, unrestrained, unpolished, the kind that comes from the chest rather than the throat. Clara's eyes lit up at the sound, as though seeing a glimpse of the man behind the sorrow. Snowflakes drifted around them, catching on Clara's eyelashes, melting in Eli's hair, dusting Marcus's dark coat. The Christmas tree glowed like a quiet promise that even the darkest seasons could be softened by unexpected kindness. And standing there with this woman and her son, two strangers who had shown him more compassion in 30 minutes than he had felt in a year, Marcus realized that tonight, in the cold winter air, something inside him had begun to heal. Not because he sought it, but because a little boy believed his mom's hugs could fix anything. And maybe, just maybe, he had been right.